Most organizations see Google as the flag bearer, and we hate the way that they ended up at Google. So what are OKRs? Well, OKRs are an acronym that stands for Objectives and Key Results. The framework originated at Intel in the late 1970s, when back then it was a typed memo, a long page of motivational copy that was the catalyst for change. It was later taken by John Dewar to Google when Google was small, and it is often credited for their hypergrowth. Fast forward to today, and if you Google how to implement OKRs, you will find the Google way. That way is to pass pretty much everything going through many hundreds of thousands of people through a framework, regardless of whether it's strategic or business as usual. So most projects, most tasks, most initiatives will pass through the framework. They have a complex scoring mechanism that uses decimals to define success and whether you have been ambitious enough. This is a magnitude of difference between where OKR started and where they ended up at Google. And we hate the way that they ended up at Google. We do not see this way as the way. It does not work for most organizations. And the problem is most organizations see Google as the flag bearer. And of course, we'd all like to be like Google, or perhaps some of us anyway. So let's break down what an OKR is, what we call real OKRs, away from all of the noise that's generated by Google from a framework that's been implemented in the Google way, and really get to the heart of what this goal-setting methodology is about. Of course, we have an objective, and the objective is matched by what is normally 2 or 3, sometimes 4 key results. The objective is meant to describe what you want to achieve in a succinct and motivational way. The key results are how you describe the achievement of the objective in outcome form. What you'll find in many OKR examples is that people confuse outcomes, which are metrics with targets, with activities, or what are often called outputs, the things that we're going to do. One, outcomes generates a much higher level of performance than outputs. But the problem is, in order to be able to work to outputs, you need a level of metric maturity. And to have metric maturity, you've got to do that intentionally. And to be really comfortable with target setting, you also have to have a level of competency. So OKRs come with an underlying capability requirement that in order to be able to use them really well, as intended, to be able to state the outcomes that mean that you would have achieved your objective, you need to be able to have metrics at hand that would confirm that that objective has been met. Let's talk about the cascade. Strategy, if we borrow from Roger Martin for a second, but there are other frameworks out there, is where we decide where we're going to play, how we're going to win, capabilities we're going to need to build through a integrated set of strategic choices and the management systems that we're going to need. OKRs are the recipient of that kind of thinking. They are how you're going to build value that customers want, that's unique to you, that will underpin a strategic advantage that can be sustained through time. OKRs are excellent at taking that and creating a goal layer that's adaptive between quarters, that allows you to test those hypotheses within your strategy and to execute those choices that you've made. The primary purpose of OKRs is to create a set of high-level goals that are how you're going to execute your strategy, and then we can work out how are we best going to organize ourselves to execute those with supporting aligned OKRs. What we never want to do is confuse operational excellence, and that by that we mean take the org chart, take a function like marketing, and give them the job of being excellent at marketing and try and codify that in goals. Of course, that builds capability. Of course, that builds revenue and profit, but it does not build long-term sustainable advantage. But we can use OKRs for that as well, but they are not strategic OKRs. We can create this alignment, it's sometimes called a cascade, of what should be a few disproportionately important goals that allow us to really focus on the things that are going to move the needle. The BAU work, the keep the lights on work, the everyday processes, the thing that actually takes up a majority of most companies' resources, fulfilling orders, etc., is not an OKR. So we need to be able to differentiate between kind of what an OKR codifies and what it doesn't. If setting the goal is one part of the puzzle, the most overlooked part of the puzzle is how we architect goal achievement. So we have goal setting and we have goal achievement. Goal achievement is where we take a look at our resources, we look at the goal, and we say, what skills, people, time, resources do we need in order to drive progress on this really important thing? What is going to slow us down? What is going to speed us up? Who is in this team? How do they work? How do they need to work? What are we going to do that frees up their time to allow them to make progress? What support can we give them? What enablement initiatives would also support faster progress? This is the job of the implementation, the implementators, the people like us, your leadership team. It is not just to learn how to use a goal format. It's to ultimately be able to say, that's where we're going to, and this is how we're going to build a bridge to get there, and this is how we're going to get there fast. Everything else outside that, we are skilled at discounting, putting down, stopping. If we've chosen the right goals, we also need to optimize the path there. And that's what a really good implementation does. The overly simplified version of an OKR is we have an objective, and as I stated, you have 2 or 3 key results that ideally would be outcomes that prove the objective. What I now want to do is make that slightly more complicated, and to a certain extent, in fact, not a certain extent, I'm calling bullshit on that format a little bit. What you realize in the real world when you're implementing OKRs is an objective needs a narrative. The narrative needs to explain what's behind the objective, the choices that we've made, what the difficult to do things are, the things that are going to trip us up, the obstacles that we're going to have to get over. You can't put that in a single sentence, but that very much matters. When we've chosen key results, we don't just choose them willy-nilly. We choose them because they're the right things to measure. They're the things that are going to drive the right behaviors because we chose them intentionally. We also set a target, and we set a target with a level of deliberateness that means that we've either got trend data or we haven't. We've either just pulled this metric from nowhere and stood it up and therefore don't really know what the starting point is, or haven't. Or even sphere of influence. There are lots of people that contribute to this metric, therefore causation and effect are slightly more complicated. The ability to articulate why that number, why that target, and any of the nuances that sit between should be in the document. If you can choose the right metrics, we're then into the territory of what's going to drive progress. What drives progress at key results are initiatives, the things that we are going to do, that we should just get on and do, because we have a high degree of confidence in their impact, and the experiments we're going to run. We believe that if we do this, this is what we will observe happen. The best way of testing that belief is this. What would make us stop and rethink this belief is that. And actually the best, cheapest, fastest way of doing that is this. So that might be fake door tests, smoke tests, A/B splits, all that kind of good stuff. That's a capability that I'm describing there. The ability to align what we're going to do, the experiments we're going to run with the outcomes that we're driving. And a team's ability to make continued progress is a skill in itself. That team needs to be a team. That team needs to be led. It has to have all of the different staging posts, milestones, support. You need to build rituals in that not just discuss learning, but celebrate the wins. We have to create dopamine, serotonin, all the way through the execution journey If things get tough, we need them to dig in and persist. We need them to know when to escalate. We need them to know when they can make decisions autonomously and when they need to ask. So in theory, we talk about OKRs like, they're just an objective and they're just a couple of key results to go with it, and this is the format you need to use. OKRs done really well. So much more than that. They're how you're going to operate. They're how you're going to think. They're how you're going to behave as a leadership team. They're your culture. They're the glue. They're how you move things and progress things. They're how you discover upcoming rising stars amongst your organization. It's how you give people autonomy and responsibility. It's how you develop careers. These are all entwined in the goal-setting framework that you choose to use. And that's why we get passionate about it. And that's why we get really angry when it's kind of boiled down and kind of reduced, that kind of reductive desire to make things overly simple and dumbed down to the point where they're kind of dumb. Or in Google's sense, or in Google's case, made so bloody complicated, no one's going to like them, love them, use them, and really have an affinity for them. And goals are there not to hold our feet to the fire. Of course, they do a bit of that, but they're there to make sure that we are heard. They're there to make sure that we can contribute. They're there to make sure that we can participate in deciding where we're going and how we're going to get there. They're things that develop our teams and our own personal careers. They're a fundamental part of the human condition. They're how we improve. It's how our organizations sustain themselves through years or decades. It's how we adapt to the world that we're in. They're how we build cultures that are envied. They're how we retain our talent. They cannot be reduced to a sentence and some bullets. If you really want to get good at OKRs, you're good at goal setting, you're good at strategy, you're good at measurement, you're good at leadership, you're good at strategic comms, you're good at experimentation, you're good at unlocking discretionary effort, you're good at really enabling psychological safety. You're good at business. You recruit talent, you keep talent. Goals are glue that holds all of that together.